Hey y'all, it's Sarah. You can see I am jumping into September a little ahead of myself, but I wanted to get started on some ideas, especially this one. I've done lemons before, but this is something a little bit different, and I really like the color, so I wanted to share this one with you guys, especially for those of us that aren't quite ready for fall spreads just yet for September. We're still in really high heat, so I'm not ready for fall just yet, but I thought this was um, a really fun page to do, and it's honestly a lot simpler than you would think. I want to go ahead and jump in and get started because there's a lot of details here to share, and I already know they get long. So the first step I like to take is to put in my divider lines that I use for sectioning off different things important to me in my planner. And to do that, I'm just going to take a straight edge or a ruler. And today I'm using gray, and I'm using a wide chisel tip just because I find it easier to maintain the width of my little divider using the chisel tip. So a little bit of advice, when you're doing this, try to keep your motion smooth and straight. Don't stop or hesitate, and you'll get a much cleaner line. Also, when I'm doing this, I'm not going to push that tip very hard against the edge of my straight edge, or it's going to push ink to bleed underneath there. And I don't want to damage the tip of my straight edge or of my chisel tip, especially since this one I've actually been using more frequently just because it's a little wider. So I'm going to start at the edge and just go down. And you can kind of see what I mean. As long as you don't hesitate or slow down, you get a really clean looking, almost printed like line. So I'm going to go ahead and do this to all of my sections. I've got my dividers down now, and I want to talk about artwork placement or doodle placement. I kind of went all over the place with this, but you pick a good spot for you to do maybe a cluster or a small little vignette. I typically lean towards the weekends because my weekends aren't as busy, and towards this area here, this dot grid area. I'm using the big planner, which is 8.5 by 11, just so you get an idea of scale that I'm using. And I want to just go ahead and jump in because there is a lot of detail. Let's get started on the artwork. I'll be using various stencils, but you could really do some of this freehand. I'm not using anything more than circles and squares for the most part. And I just wanted to show this one because I'm taking a little bit of a cheat. You can absolutely use just a regular circle type stencil. But I do have this Dollar Tree one. You can see it's like it's a 12 by 12 stencil, and it's got kind of these geometrics going on. And I'm going to use this one, and here's why. To do my circles, I'm going to end up drawing them in half anyway, and this one happened to have some on there that were already done where I didn't have to go in, so I'm using that, but you can absolutely do the very same thing with just regular circles. So let's get started. I'm coming straight in with just my pen. If you're nervous about this part, you can always pencil in first, but I'm just going to come straight in with just a cheap dollar store ballpoint pen. And I'm starting probably right about here. And I think I'm going to use this lower grid as kind of my horizon for this vignette. And I want to try to make sure that my pottery here isn't lopsided, so I'm trying to get parallel to this line. And I'm going to be swapping back and forth as I go across here. So my next one, I'm going to do some kind of square. So this is a square I picked. I'm not really sure what size it is. It looks just probably about 1.25 inches wide. And it is more on the rectangle side. So I'm just going to do roughly the two sides ish, close enough. I just wanted to make sure I had parallel lines for the most part, because I'm going to do a little cheat here, and I pulled one of these planner type stencils, and I need this rounded edge. And if you think you can freehand that well, go ahead and do it. I just was not super confident in getting both corners rounded out. So I'm taking this little moment to cheat, and I'm going down to those bottom corners. Hopefully you can see what I'm doing, and just trying to align them up and round them out some. And then I'll close off the top when I start going in with my marker. I'm bringing this guy back, this partial circle back. And like I said, don't fret if you don't have these particular stencils. You can absolutely do a circle and just cut it off part of the way up. And I don't think it should be any problem to replicate this look. So that's what I've started with. You can do all kinds of different shapes for your pots. I'm going to use this same one and pick a slightly smaller partial circle. This one is a little bit different. It's not quite as easy to trace, so I've got to play around with it just a little. So it doesn't finish out at the bottom like that. That's simple enough. I'm just going to spin it around and try to catch that round edge and finish it out. It's not going to really matter all that much because I'm putting bases on some of these along the bottoms. So I think I'm going to get a little playful up here, so I'll wait on that. I want to go ahead and jump to this side because it's just a repeat of the same things that I just did, but I'm going to end up using a larger circle. Probably, let me measure this for you just to give you an idea. The one I'm using looks to be probably about 1.5 inches wide. And I'm just going to go ahead and place it down, trying to use the dots to make sure that, once again, this one's not necessarily crooked. And I'll have to fill in the rest of the components of that. And I've been doing that when I played with mine. I did it while I was in the marker process. And to me, that made it easier. I think it made it easier to just kind of eyeball those details in. I'm bringing another square in, and I'm going to do the same thing with this square. I'm doing a slightly larger one. I'm going to do the same thing with it, where I just want to partially get down the sides here. So really, I'm using a rectangle because I want the parallel lines. And I'll come back in with that same other stencil and just round those edges out. And you could freehand all of this. I have versions that I just winged it. They're a little more rustic. It's still cute though. So I'm at another stage like that. And I would add some small ones here and there, and I'll determine that after I get like the bigger chunks or the bigger pieces in place or applied. I usually come in and throw in, you know, a little smaller scale, but let's talk about the bigger pieces. So marker wise, let me show you what I pulled out to play with, just so you know it never really matters. Assuming that you've tested the markers and they hold up to your page, it really, the high end, low end, it really doesn't matter because I'm using a Crayola Super Tip. This is a regular ink pen from my local grocery chain. This is a Dollar Tree INC yellow brush marker. Yeah, I can't tell you what this one is anymore. I'm not sure. There's a couple of the generic style that look like mild liners, but they're not. And this is a sad little marker from Dollar Tree that comes in like a 10-pack. That's what I've got stashed right beside me, just so you know what I'm using if you're trying to replicate. But honestly, you could probably do this, at least a good portion of this, with a blue ink pen. So I want to go ahead and get started on the things where I was saying that this is where my marker is going to do some of the work for me. And you'll see. I want to try to do my best to come straight across here. Now, I will tell you that you can use a straight edge, but every time I did, because this marker is pretty saturated, it kept bleeding under my straight edge. So I'm going to do my best to try to just do a straight line across without a straight edge. And I feel like if I wasn't using such a new marker, or such a, it's not that they're new, I just haven't used this color very much apparently. So that wasn't too bad. It's okay though. I'm not going to panic if it's not super straight, because I can clean some of that up with my line art. And I want to do the same thing. And if you notice, I'm starting like just a little hair outside of these planters. And I think I want a nice rim on each one of them, so I'm just going to do this to all of them. Fortunately, these two at least have some guidance there. And you can see they're not perfectly straight lines. However, there are plenty of ways to clean that up, and you'll see how I make them look a little neater and a little straighter. Same thing with some of the details on this. So using that kind of leaned over brush stroke or marker stroke, I'm going to put some bases to some of these, or some bottoms on some of these. And I'm just using the width of my marker for these larger ones. And let's see which ones I want to add to. Since I didn't come all the way down to the line super well on this one, this is a good place where I could add a base to it. And same for these guys. Since I didn't necessarily get all the way to that grid line, now they all have pretty decent little bases. I think I'll give this one as well. So you can see they're already starting to look a little bit like planters. Now, when it came to putting in some of the decorative lines, this is where I recommend some kind of blue pen that matches whatever blue marker you're using. So I've got a couple options sitting here of just blue pens. This one you guys recognize and know what style this is. All of these can be helpful. Or just a regular blue ballpoint pen can still get the work done. It can still get it finished. Let's see. I'm going to try with this flare. I haven't played much with it. I used, on my practice run, I used the HEB one, but I'm going to try it anyway, and we'll see. And I'll let you know, because I know a lot of us actually have the flares. And I'm just going to grab some kind of straight edge here. And I grabbed a really thin one, thinking in my process that as thin as this is, I can really press it down to the paper to help prevent some of the bleeding underneath there. That's what I'm hoping for. We'll find out. So here's one of the ways that I was discussing that I could clean this line up. So I'm going to line this up with the edge of my paper. And I do think this gives me a much cleaner line. And I don't know how much use I'm going to get out of this one, because it sure looks like it's trying to dry out. But that cleaned that line up substantially. I'm going to use this ruler though, because at this moment I feel like I need a little more help making sure I get it straight and parallel. So now I've got those as much cleaner lines, and then when I go in and do my line tracing or my outlining of anything, I can always do that very same thing that I just did to clean up those lines. So I'm back over here, and let's start decorating these pots. You can go as creative as you want to with this, but you'll see the details that I'm adding. Really, there's nothing technical or complicated about them. I'm going to use stripes quite a bit. So you can see I've done double stripes here at the top, and I'll do pretty much the same at the bottom section. And I do think my poor little Flair pen has seen better days. Same thing on this one. I might throw in right about there. And maybe a hair up. And let's see here. I'm not doing the exact same design maybe that I did with my originals. I'm just kind of getting creative as I go here. So I think at this point, I'm pretty good with that. Let's play with some ideas. So the first thing I think I'm going to do for this one is I'm going to start drawing kind of some swirls and no real pattern. You can see that. So really, I'm just filling in where I want some kind of design at. Okay, I feel like there's enough there to play with. Just a few swirls of some type. And I'm going to cheat. I'm bringing in my blue marker again to use it almost like a dotting tool. And I'm going to dot somewhat sideways to get almost a leaf size dot. And I'm just going to throw those in there. Anywhere I feel like the space might need to be filled in. And you guys will see me doing a lot of spinning on this one to get some of these tiny little designs put in. But I'm not doing anything difficult other than kind of dropping that marker down. I might throw a little dot there inside each of those circles. I'm trying to make sure I throw some where all my start and stop points were for my little swirls. And just really use them to fill in. So we've already got some kind of design going there with very, very little effort. So now that one's going to dry for a second because this is a pretty deep blue. I don't think it's going to bleed through. There's a little ghosting there. I'm going to be honest with y'all. There's a little ghosting there. So maybe do your little dotting a hair faster than what I was doing, but that's okay. So this one here, I do think I want to add one more line to break off where I'm going to start an actual pattern. So let's throw that in. And maybe about this width. I'm pretty much just filling things in one way or another. And literally this is very much just kind of a doodle process. So right here, I think I'll just try to do some letter S's. It might be easier if you turn it this way. So some little S's right about there. And I'm bringing back my blue marker. And on this wider section, I'm just going to swoop down, kind of like a letter C, and swoop back again. And then I'll do it from different areas. So a few little random swoops like that. I might bring one around and curl it up a little wider. Curling something around that edge a little wider. Throw some little dots down those section, maybe some dots here inside as a filler. So I think that works as some kind of pattern. I might throw some florals up here on this little pattern that I started, this little S pattern. You can really take this as far as you want to. You can absolutely go crazy with it, with pattern. And think about the patterns that you're using, because you can turn around and use those in the backgrounds of your squares if you want to. And you'll see where I sort of tried to do that. And add, you know, some interesting pattern and texture there. And I'll show you a little bit more. I wanted to share a few patterns, or a few workable patterns. I am going to do my best to use this marker so I can get a thicker line, but there is a bleed risk. We'll see if I make it here. There's a slight bleed risk in doing this with this one. Well, that worked out all right. I'm pretty happy with that. So this one, I'm taking easy route. We're just gonna go and zigzag up and down. That was pretty simple. And I think I might add, I wanted to keep a few of them fairly simple, but you could make all of them as bold with pattern as you really wanted to. Now see, there is a little bit bleed right there. You can see there's a little bit of bleed. So extra caution when you're trying this with your marker. I don't think it's that big of a deal with as much pattern as going on with this page. I'm not letting it hurt my feelings. So that bled most definitely. And let's see if I can clean it up. There we go. You could almost work the little bit of bleeding that it does into your pattern, because look, it's actually kind of cool. Let's see if I can do that. If you need to fix a random mistake, let's see if we can fix it. So if I add, I'm coming in with my pen. If I add just another line under there, and maybe throw a few more speckles into that. Oh, look, it came out, the smearing now looks like some part of the design. So let's see if I can do that in other places. Right here, I might just clean it up. And right here, I might just clean it up. So that worked out. I worked it right into the design. I'm sure you could probably do it intentionally too and drag it down and make yourself a pretty cool design. So I'm going to just draw a line across here. And this one is pretty simple. I'm going to take my blue marker again. And basically, I'm doing little points, like little triangular points down that line. So I feel like that's a pretty decent pattern. In this one, I'm going to do very similar to the other one, but I'm making those a little thicker, I think. And now I'm just going to throw a bunch of pattern in there. Maybe some dots in some of these sections. Couple lines like this. You can get it as elaborate as you want. Like, you can take this really detailed. And I do have some that I sat and just as a idle doodle thing to do, just making the little swirlies and things like that. So this one's a fairly relaxing one to just sit and do all the little patterns. Okay, I feel like there's something there. I might come down on this one. And I don't think I'm going to do too much to it since it's very small. So I think I'm okay with that pattern as well. I might throw a few more dots though. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that pattern. Mostly, I just wanted to keep the eye busy on this page. Like, I wanted to keep my eye busy looking around at all the different patterns and things like that. I am a pattern person. I think that comes from my scrapbook days of mixing pattern papers and getting super excited about all the different patterns and wanting to use them all. So I'm noticing right here, let's talk about this. If you can see, the top of this pot right here doesn't look so great. Now, I could go in with this pen and clean that up and widen that line, or I can do it with my outline. And I'm going to show you what I mean. I'm trying to, my ruler keeps catching on the hole punched edge. So if you notice right here, this part really just doesn't line up. And you can tell it's uneven, but I'm going to go over the even parts and the kind of uneven parts and see if I can make that look balanced. Can you see that difference of just making that line look a little more straightened out. And I'll do that with all of these rather than try to come in with the marker and risk bleed and all of that. I think I'm just going to do it this way and straighten these lines out with the outline. And you can see what a big difference that makes just doing it that way. That's some of the tricks that I use. If I don't necessarily get it right in the outline process, I usually can clean it up a little bit. And I think that bottom one was pretty good. But you can notice now those lines across that top certainly look a little straighter, a little cleaner, a little more even. Let's start adding some more details. So the first thing I think I want to do is coming back in with, looks like 1.5 inch circle right about here. And I just want to move it up. And I want to try to keep it centered above. And I think I'm going to take it all the way up into this next square up here. Let's see, are we pretty well centered? I'm going to check. I'm pretty well centered at this point. I'm using a pencil this time because I don't actually want this circle to show up. It's just my guide. And while I've got my circle, I want to come over and do pretty much the same thing on the other side. And I may go a hair bigger just for a little drama on this side. I might take it a little larger. Actually, I think I'm going to stick with this 1.5 inch. And I've got a line centered up from this little pot here. And for the drama on this side, I think what I'll do is turn this into a topiary. So I'm taking it, probably about here with a slightly smaller circle. And I want to erase some of that. Just what's in the center, because once you put marker over it, it can be a little more difficult to erase. My circles, I'm fading out. I can still see a bit of it, but I'm going to go ahead and fade out as much of it as I can. So maybe you can see, I've erased it to that point just so I can see kind of what I'm doing. I'm bringing in just this cheap yellow brush tip marker from Dollar Tree. And try not to focus too hard on this. I'm not great with circles. I'm not great with, well, squares, circles, ovals. However, it's okay if you're not perfect on this part because you can hide any errors with the leaves. So I'm just trying to get a little oval type shape in there of the yellow. I'm doing my best. And on some of them, I might be outside of my little circle, and that's okay. So I feel like maybe that's a good amount of lemons on there. I'm going to come down here, do the same thing. Just throwing out some little yellow ovals. And I want to do it on this one as well. And let's erase down these circles just a hair. And let's fill in some ovals. So there's a few there. And we'll add some others in as we go, just places you might want to fill in. I'm pretty sure I want to throw some down in between these planters here. So that's a pretty good start. I'm taking some kind of pale green. These are pretty close in color. I've got a scrap piece of paper just to kind of show you where these colors are. I'm pretty sure that this this terrible looking one, I'm pretty sure this is Mr. Pen. You can tell how often I use that. It's such a nice green. And this is a knockoff mild liner. I don't even know what brand this is. And you can see that one's just a hair brighter, a hair lighter, but they're both kind of within the same color line. So these are what I'm using. And this is really simple. One of the reasons I'm using these is that chisel tip. And it's going to do a lot of the work for me that I can't necessarily do. And before I do that really quick, I want to go ahead and put my stem in. So I'm using chisel tip again in kind of this faded brown color. And I'm just going to line up a straight edge right along my center area and just drag that down. For that topiary, I'm going to move my circles here. I think I'm done with those for the moment. And same for this one. Just in one motion, I'm dragging that down. So we've got our stems. I might add a little more color to those stems just to deepen or darken them. That's pretty pale. So here's where the fun part is. And you may find it easier to move your pen all around the same way I'm about to. But I'm taking this chisel edge and swiping it sideways. Let's get a little closer. So a little on the diagonal like that. And if you've got wonky looking lemons, this green is going to go over your yellow pretty well. So some of them I might actually stick outside of the circle. And I'm just moving this all around so they all go different directions. And you're going to do this until the entire thing is filled. You can always come in and do a light layer underneath. You can see that's what I did. I took the slightly lighter one and just did a light layer underneath, or you could do it on top if it's light enough to fill in a little of the spaces that you don't have leaves. And you could do the very same thing with just one green color. I just like an excuse to use my markers. So this one, I'm just going to go over the top of it. And hopefully you can see that just that little bit of drag with that chisel tip gives you fairly even sized leaves that I'll outline later, and that makes it a whole lot easier than trying to draw out all the leaves the same size. This pretty much gets you there with a whole lot less effort. And I'm not outlining all of these. When I get to that stage, I'll just outline some of them so you can kind of see. While I've got this in my hand, I'm going to bring it down here. Let me go with the lighter one. Let's start with the lighter one each time. And I'm just going to do the same thing here. I might throw a few leaves right in there. And some right about there. And we'll do the same thing on this other side. And if you do this part, just the filling in, you don't even have to be excellent at it. Leave some of the white space. It's fine. You can kind of see that's a little bit of a mess inside of there, but once you start adding the leaves, and I'm going to give that a second before I go back over. So let's throw these leaves in. Okay, speaking of leaves, let's talk about these plants. I took the easy route doing this very kind of same thing. So I flicked up. Pretty much like fanned them out. And on this side, I fanned them out the same way, but I curled them over. So I tried to space them out some kind of way. That gave me a pretty good idea of where I wanted my plants to be. And same with this little guy. Let's drop his down. There we go. And now we can start doing the same thing with the leaves. So I'm using this marker tip. And I'm turning it all kinds of crazy ways just so I can go down. I brought you a little closer so maybe you can see. And it's okay if they don't all look perfect, because not all leaves look exactly the same on a plant. See, I've got it at a weird angle right now. Some of those leaves went a little crazy on me. It's okay. That goes back to, in the outline process, you can typically clean a lot of that up. Which is why I tend to start with markers, let them do some of the work that I find more difficult, like getting even size leaves. I find that a little more difficult if I'm just drawing them, but like this, I can outline them so much simpler. And I'm pretty much going to use that same method on all of them, but I'll get a little different look depending on how I outline them. And you'll see what I mean in a minute. So I'm going to go ahead and do all of these plants that way. So let's get to the outlining process and what I did to kind of give each one of them a different look. And I'll start with this one. I'm taking my ballpoint pen and lightly dragging down the center of that stem for that marker. I completely forgot a side of leaves on this. There we go. That's a little better. So for these particular leaves, I went ahead and outlined them basically like my marker shape gave me. And I'm not putting a lot of heavy pressure because I want these lines to be a little daintier, a little finer. And you can see some of my shapes are different than others because some of my marks, I know that color fades out on here because it's such a light green, but some of my little angled chisel marker marks are different shaped. So I'm letting that guide me. And I'm also putting a center down them. A partial center down the stem of the leaf or the vein of the leaf. And not all of them are great shaped, and that's okay because we want it to look like a real plant. And real plants have a variety of shape in their leaves. So I'm going to continue this, and then we're going to add we're going to add some more leaves, and they're just going to be floating there in the background as basically a filler in this plant where some of this empty space is. So I'm bringing back my marker, and we're just going to have some leaves, maybe some stems floating out here that aren't necessarily outlined, that are more faded into the back of this plant. Maybe you can see what I'm doing. I'm just adding some there in the background that really aren't attached to anything. They're not going to be outlined. We're just going to leave them like that as a hint of leaf. So here, basically the same thing. I did the center of the stem. But here's what I did differently to make these leaves their own kind of look. So I'm only outlining the bottom, or a portion of the bottom of these leaves. It almost comes out looking a little fern-like. So this looks like it gives me an entirely different plant variety, even though I pretty much did the very same thing to create this plant. It gives it the idea that it's a different plant. So just each of the leaves, a little of the bottom section. And you can always throw in some of the kind of faint phantom background leaves there. And for this plant, I'm just going to outline it all. But you can see with the difference that makes, because the stems are straight up, and then this one I kind of limped them over, so it will still look like a different plant even if I outline them the very same. And I won't add the little vein line down these particular leaves. So pretty much with the same effort, we just got the idea of 3 different plants without knowing how to draw 3 entirely different plants. So you can kind of see where I'm going with that. Now at this point, I would come in with that slightly darker green and just drag it across that area and maybe up that stem a little bit. And hopefully you can see that. So I just took it a little darker in some places, just to look like the leaves were multi-tonal, but I didn't really put much effort into the leaves. I just went down the stems, and that pretty much gave the idea that the leaves themselves had different tones to it. So let's get up here and talk about how we're outlining this. At this stage, I want to go ahead and make sure all of my lines are gone. And you can see what I mean. It's a little harder sometimes to erase pencil once you put marker over it. But it's fine because most of this is going to blend in. Same thing with these. I'm following the shape of a lot of them, just their independent shape. I might put some veining or stemming down some of them. And if you notice, I'm skipping around. I'm not necessarily doing all of them but it's going to appear like I have. So the shapes are a little uneven, but they're all pretty close. Some of them are a little weird shape. Some of my little dashes were a little weird shape. That's fine. Blends right on in. So before I take that any further, I'd like to go ahead and outline my lemon a little bit. And I'm doing it really faint. And somewhere along this side, I'm going to do like a tiny letter C and maybe a little dot in it. And let's do this side and you can see that again. So like maybe a little letter C. And I'm doing such a faint line. I'm putting very little pressure around that line. So right here, this lemon looks like I could show the end of it. So the little kind of letter C and the little dot. You can judge for yourself with however your leaves and things cover. Some of them you might be able to get the little dot end in there, and some of them you might not, and that's fine. So we've got some lemons outlined nicely now. You might even put a few dots or maybe a little line somewhere in those lemons along one of the edges. We're going to oomph them up a little as well. Nothing major, just give them a little more tone and make them pop off the tree. Okay, that looks like about as many leaves as I can kind of shove in there. I feel that's pretty full. Just hit some of those tips. So when I said we can touch up our lemon, I'm bringing in, this is out of a little kid pack at Dollar Tree. But any slightly darker yellow. And you can see this one's had rough times. But any slightly darker yellow, just pick a side and basically outline it down one side. Pretty much like that. So now we've got some lemon with some depth. I could come in at this stage with this green again, and because of the green I'm using, I also could very well do this very same thing I'm about to do in gray. So right around that lemon, I just curved in with this green. You might want to give it a little time before you come in and do this part. So anywhere the lemon curved into the greenery, I just threw a little line across there, if you can see that. So at this point, we've gotten a pretty good lemon tree topiary thing. I think I want to go ahead and draw in my lines here. And that definitely makes that look a lot cleaner. I can come back in with that same brown that I used to do this. And I might drag it part of the way there. And I just got out of line. Shame on me. And drag a little of it up there. So quick tip. If you do something like this, this typically doesn't bother me, but since you saw me do it, I'll show you an easy way to try to fix a little slip up like that. So I've just got a white gel pen. Doesn't always work. It depends on what color is underneath there. If it's super dark, this may not help. But right there, I'm just going to try to come in with my white pen along that edge. And there we go. So much better. I'm going to start filling out some of these areas down here. And I'm going to try the same thing that I did in the tree. So I want to lightly outline over to the edge and then create that little bump. Same on this one. Let's try it. My hands are a little wiggly when I do such a light line. I do such light pressure. And it ends up giving that lemon a little bit more textured edge. Since I can't do it super smooth and I'm using such light pressure, I'm just going to outline the leaves. Pretty much in the shape that they're in. I might even throw a little of that kind of jagged dotted line across there. And then I'll bring that yellow back, that fine tip little yellow marker. And gave them a little something something. Something else you may want to do is kind of create an artificial horizon here, or an artificial line. And typically to do that, since it's already looking like it's sitting on a line, I'm going to clean that up a little bit. I feel like that looks a little something. So I'm going to clean it up. If you look at it, see it's a little uneven. So with my ballpoint pen, I'm just going to come across there. And that helped it quite a bit. So to do like this kind of artificial horizon, you guys probably seen me do this before. I'm just dragging my pen, dropping it down, dragging it slightly. And I might want to do it on this one because I feel like the base of it looks like it's a little crooked. If you see that, see, it looks like it's a little crooked. So I might clean it up like that. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to go ahead and do kind of this false horizon. And that helped quite a bit. I'll do the same thing with these. At least on this one, I'll go ahead and give it kind of this spot to sit on. So I'm cleaning that up some. And then we'll go ahead and do this part. Got a little lemon there. And I threw a couple extra leaves on this side, but I sure just did that one a little strange. I think it's fine. So that's pretty much all the details for the artwork part, or at least this portion of it. But I do want to share a couple other things, and you can hang out for this, or you can have learned what you needed to learn off of these details. But I want to share a couple other things. So look at some of your stencils. If you've got these style stencils, look at them and see if any of them have some interesting shapes. This was almost a bracket shape. So shapes like this, these interesting kind of shapes, that's what I used for that one. I just used half of one and cut it off. You can also just do some small squares. and fill those in with a little bit. But I wanted to show you this one because I thought it was pretty cute, because I said I like patterns. And obviously I smeared some ink there. But I wanted to show you this pattern really quick. And all I did was basically replicate this right here, the polka dots. Oop, sorry, didn't mean to bump you guys. But I want to show you how I did that. So I'm going to start off with some kind of square to leave writing room in there. So I'm just using this square right here and popping it somewhere about there, trying to get it centered. And I'll go ahead and outline that. I'm bringing out my little polka dot stencil, and I've been asked recently where I got this. I'm going to be honest, I've had this for years, and I used to use it with stamping and inking to put, to sponge over it and put polka dots on things. So I'm not really sure where it came from. I want to say possibly it's a Happy Planner one to begin with. One of the older Happy Planner ones. But I did look on Amazon and ordered something similar to try out for you guys so I could share. And as soon as I get it in, if it's anything similar to this one, I'll share the link for you. It was a set. The one I got was a set. So I just traced those around the best I could because my pen's trying to be difficult. I just traced around like that. So I left the square in the center. I'm coming back in now with just my blue marker that I use for everything else. You could do this in your yellow if you wanted to, but on the blue, I felt like it showed up better. So I'm going to try to fill these holes in neatly, or these dots in neatly-ish. I'm close enough, I think. So you can see I'm not getting them necessarily perfect, but that's okay. With this idea, it works out fine. So I got some color in them. I feel like this one might need a little more. There we go. I got some color in them. And I came back in with my green. And let's get a little closer. So I've got my green, and I'm going to try to do the same thing on a small scale. Mostly, it just turned out to be kind of a line. But I'm doing that to all of my dots. Just a couple little green lines around all of my dots. So hopefully you can see how I did that. Now that that's done, I'm coming back with my white gel pen. And this is my preference, is just the Uniball Signo. I have several others and they work okay. I don't know. I like the way these feel. I like the way they work. So I stick with it. But just a white gel pen. And I'm going to circle in there. That ink is not going to spread always perfectly with a gel pen, which is great. It works fine. And I'm just doing a little swirly all the way to the outer edge. And basically, I'm getting a little tiny rose print. As a pattern filler, I think this is pretty cute. So I can just come in now with my pen and try to outline these leaves. Easier said than done. This pen is not, I feel like it's not flowing like they usually do. So now I have this cute little rose looking pattern. One last thing that I might do is I might just take a gray marker of some sort and line out beside, just pick a side. I'm right dominant, so I tend to go to the right. And I'm just going to put a little shadow around some of these. Nothing major, just a little something makes it pop out a little more. You can see I did it underneath my square here, so it pops out a little more. I might even do it under one of these lemons, just to come down off this tree a hair. I didn't take it too far. I just did one side of things. But I wanted to share a few other tips on doing this spread. You might want to do some highlights to your pottery or your ceramics that we've got going on here. And with that, I mean just a hair of things. Nothing big deal. We're not taking this too far. I'm taking my white Signo again. And even across the white parts, I drew just a line, maybe a little line there, maybe something along that round edge, or even on the base of them. It really looks cool on the more heavily patterned ones. So that might be a little thing to add. You don't even have to take it to that much detail. It's just something that I did. Same thing with my lemons, except for I'm using this Dollar Tree white. It says metallic marker. The white ones are not metallic. The other parts of the series are the blue, mauve, silver, gold. They are metallic, but this Dollar Tree one happens to be one of my favorite ones to highlight. It's very faint. So on these lemons, and you might not even see it, it's so subtle. I might come in right across the opposite spot of anywhere that I did this little darker line. So the opposite side of that, I'm using this white one. Maybe you can see that. And I'll end up doing that with my other lemons. And I think I'm going to wrap this up. I'll finish out my own spread. I'll add the details. I'll add the spots for my plans and things like that. And I may fill in a little more. And when I do, I just wanted to share with you that just repeat some of the elements. If you want to make, a much fuller page, maybe repeat these small lemon elements. I mixed it in here. I pretty much put it beside all my planters, so you can kind of see that. One other thing that you might do with your white pen, while I'm thinking about it, that you might do with your white pen while you're putting in highlights. So on these bigger patterns, I just thought that I might come in. Let me get my ink flow in here. And add a little something like that. And I'll get a little closer for you. So maybe you can see that it just kind of elevates your pattern a little bit. It makes it look a little more detailed. Maybe a little more intricate. So you can always do that to some of those and just add another element of a small detail, and it really makes it look like you did something, that you really took some time to get all of these little prints in. So I hope you enjoy this one as much as me. I know it still ended up being long, but there was a lot of tiny details to share. However, I think this is so cute. I have done lemons multiple times previously. I think I just like the bright yellow. Visually, I think I like it. However, I love it with this blue pattern and how well the colors pop off the page and how ridiculous you can get with the little details if you want to. I had a lot of fun playing with this. This really did kind of go into doodle stage for me here on the fill-in of these. I mean, really, that's pretty much just doodling around and swirling my marker around. But I really enjoyed this one. I absolutely love how it turned out. I may add a few more details. I might flick some lines down my topiary. Might do it on this side. And otherwise, I'm thrilled with this. I will probably be using this again just because, maybe switch it out, something other than lemons. But I love the blue, and let's find out how it went. We did not turn out too bad. I have a hair of ghosting from a couple places where I did the dots right here on the front, and then I took it a little easier. However, when I color on this side to do my doodle a day, I will probably end up hiding and masking most of that. But given how deep this blue is, I'm pretty impressed. So I can't wait to fill this one in. I will be posting it in the groups just to show you my end result and maybe some of the after the pen. But that's all I got to share. I'm going to continue playing with this one, and I'll let you look at my final practice one for a few more ideas really quick. I do really love how this turned out. And I always want to remind, on your boxes, when you're just drawing in your squares, it is a really fun element just to pop some color at the top and just to drop a little bit of gray right underneath it. I think that really makes the squares kind of pop off the page. But that's all I've got to share. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I absolutely did. And I plan on seeing you guys soon, hanging out with you soon, because I already have my next couple of ideas rip-roaring and ready to go. That's why I'm already into September, even though it's not there yet. I'm pretty excited. I hope I can get you excited to try these. Talk to you soon. Bye, y'all.